Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, FPL Consult here, and in today's video I'm going to share with you guys some players to buy and sell for FPL Game Week 3. Now before we jump into the video, I want to give a massive shout out to every single one of you guys. Thank you all so much for helping me to hit 8,000 subscribers. It is truly a milestone for the channel and it really makes me very happy to receive all the support from you guys. So really thankful, and I do not take this for granted. I will continue to try my best to put out the best content that I can for you guys to help you through the FPL 24-25 season. So let's jump into this video for now. And looking at these few buys that I have for you guys, I'm centering this video around Nkunku replacements because he is one of the players that I guess is more highly owned and people are starting to ship out as well. He has already dropped in price to 6.4 million as of recording. But I do think like some people have still held on to them or held on to Nkunku. So I'm going to discuss some replacements starting from the cheapest one all the way to I guess the slightly more expensive replacements for Nkunku. And hopefully you guys enjoy this one. So let's talk about the first replacement, and that is Morgan Rogers. To be fair, despite him being the cheapest replacement, I think he is the most popular replacement. There's a couple of reasons why I think it's good to go for Morgan Rogers. Firstly, the 1.5 million cost saving, or maybe 1.4 million now that he has dropped to 6.4 million. So that's one thing. The extra money that you get can be used to upgrade other areas of your team. For example, Saka to Salah moving forward if come game week 5 you want to make that move when Saka has Manchester City and Salah has Bournemouth. So those are moves that potentially doing Nkunku to Rogers would allow later down the line. So I do like that. Secondly, I think he's really good for what he offers at 5 million in terms of the minutes that he's getting. He's gotten 2 90-minute games already so far. The biggest concern going into this season was his minutes, but he's looked good for it so far. We will have to see how Champions League is going to affect Morgan Rogers' minutes. Potentially, maybe he gets taken off slightly earlier in some games, or I could even see a situation where he is benched in order to prepare for some European games, for example, if the Premier League games are not as tough. And when I look at the fixtures moving forward for him, it is truly an amazing run of fixtures. It's Leicester away now in Game Week 3. Everton and Wolves both at home, and that is where Aston Villa are really strong at. And then Ipswich away, also a great fixture. And then the Manchester United fixture in Game Week 7. Probably the toughest one out of these 5 fixtures that we see here on screen, but yet it's at home again. So I also do fancy Aston Villa in that fixture. So truly it's a really good run for Morgan Rogers, and I think for the price point that he offers compared to someone like Leon Bailey, the data that he brings is kind of similar to that of Leon Bailey as well. It's not too far off. In fact, it's slightly better than Leon Bailey's data. He's taken one more shot. He's also gotten more XG than Leon Bailey. What I like about Morgan Rogers is that he plays through the center as compared to someone like Leon Bailey playing on the wings. So kind of being closer to goal and being more central just gives him more opportunities for attacking returns. And I just like that at 5 million, this is what we are getting from a player like Morgan Rogers. So he to me feels like the best replacement, and he's also the most popular one. I would say that if you are kind of thinking twice about whether you want to go for Morgan Rogers as compared to other players, it would make sense to plan ahead slightly and see whether you do need this extra money or not. And for my own team as well, I have actually made the transfer for Nkunku to Morgan Rogers, but that's also because I've planned ahead slightly, which I will share in the team selection video later on this week, but I will need that money later on. So see if that applies to your team, and then it can help you to kind of narrow down what replacements you want to go for. But at 5 million, I think Morgan Rogers is a great shout. So my next replacement for Nkunku is Emil Smith-Rowe at 5.5 million, more expensive than Morgan Rogers, and by the time you're watching this, maybe he would have already risen in price to 5.6 million. He is 17.9% owned right now, so much higher ownership compared to Morgan Rogers. But when I look at the fixtures for Fulham as well, it's really good, so I don't think the boat has kind of sailed for Fulham. I still think there are returns for Smith-Rowe to get in the next few games. It's Ipswich away in Game Week 3, West Ham at home, Newcastle at home, and then Forest away, before their slightly tougher fixture in Game Week 7, which is Man City away. So a really good run of the next 4 fixtures, and looking at the positions that Smith-Rowe takes up, he is the more advanced out of Smith-Rowe and Andreas Pereira. by all means, Andreas Pereira is also a great asset to own. He is on all set pieces and he's likely on penalties as well. But I just think looking at the positions that Smith Rowe takes up, he's the more attacking one. He is the one that plays the number 10 role. And he just pops up at those places where, he's more likely to get returns. So looking at the actual stats or the number of shots that he's taken, it's actually not very impressive. Only 2 shots in total in 2 games, and 1 was on target. That was the goal that he scored. So he put up an XG of 0.53. Majority of that was from the goal he scored against Leicester. But I think a large portion of this actually comes down to the number of minutes that he's played so far. He's only had 62 minutes in the first game in game week 1 and 68 minutes in the second game for game week 2. So I think with more minutes for him, I do see that he puts up better numbers. And in terms of, his fitness and getting him back to playing a full 90-minute game, Marco Silva has always said, even in preseason, that he will manage Smith Rowe's minutes. And looking at the game week 1 minutes being 62 and the game week 3 minutes being 68, I think they are progressively increasing his minutes. So I think for the foreseeable future, especially in the next few games, I think we could see him even reach the 75 to 80 minute mark, in which case I think he also becomes a great asset to own with more minutes on the pitch. So I think like the boat hasn't left for Smith Rowe. There is still time to buy him and get on the returns that he potentially will get moving forward. So I do like him as an option. For those who already have Morgan Rogers, I think your next best option for me feels like Emil Smith Rowe, and vice versa, right? If you have Emil Smith Rowe, then I think going for Morgan Rogers is perfectly viable as well. So next up, it's Morgan Gibbs-White at 6.5 million. So we're increasing the budget here and we're matching Nkunku's price of 6.5 million now. Obviously, he has dropped in price, so you likely will have to have at least 0.1 extra so that you can reach someone like Morgan Gibbs-White here. He is very low owned at 4.7% ownership, but I think he has a great immediate fixture now in game week 3 with Wolves at home. We saw how leaky Wolves were defensively against Chelsea, so there are areas defensively that Nottingham Forest can exploit against Wolves. But you look at the next few fixtures, it's quite tough. It's Liverpool away and Brighton away. So the thinking behind Morgan Gibbs-White, or if you are to replace Nkunku with him, is that I think you would need to have a good rotation, i.e. to say that you need to have a good bench that you can rotate with Morgan Gibbs-White, simply because I don't think he's a player that I want to start every single game week for even the next 2 or next 3 game weeks, because those are tough fixtures. It is this Wolves at home fixture that I think he could do quite well in. He is obviously on all set pieces. He's guaranteed nailed for 90 minutes, etc. We know what we get with Morgan Gibbs-White, and at the price point that he's at, arguably you just get a lot of certainty with him. The only thing I would say is that he is just not super exciting as an asset, because Nottingham Forest attack is just not known to be one that scores loads of goals. Gibbs-White is more like a creator for them. And he did pick up a huge amount of XG, 0.57 against Southampton, and he scored that goal as well. So actually, when you look at the numbers that he's put up, 6 shots and 2 on target, it is very impressive. You look at the heat map that he's at as well, he is just operating very centrally, and I think a very key player to the Forest attack. My only thing with him is, again, as I've said, Liverpool away and Brighton away. Do you have players that you can rotate with him? And if you do, then I think Morgan Gibbs-White is an okay consideration. I think people who would be considering Gibbs-White are people who have other areas, or I guess other players who are quite risky. Say, for example, you are in a position where you have Lewis Hall in defense. You also have, other risky players in midfield, and maybe a Jacob Murphy in midfield, for example. Like, if you have all these risky players and you just want a 6.5 million asset that is guaranteed to start week in, week out, and has a good fixture immediately now in game week 3, then I think Morgan Gibbs-White just fits the bill. You don't have to worry about him moving forward. And I do think like he gives you that certainty. So I get the appeal for Morgan Gibbs-White. I just don't think he's a very exciting option. He's just a stable pick, and the numbers are just decent as well. So against Wolves, again, I'm expecting a good performance from Forest. After that, you will have to kind of rotate him quite a bit. So keeping the price point the same at 6.5 million, we're going all the way to the other spectrum now, and instead of going for certainty, we are going for a slightly risky pick, but one that I think can be very explosive in terms of returns, and it is Savinho, or Savio as some of you may call him. He is at 6.5 and very low owned, 0.9%, so he's a massive differential. What obviously draws me to him is how quickly he has settled into that Man City team. He obviously picked up 2 assists against Ipswich and he looked very, very lively. On the right, people alluding to the fact that he was a combination of Sterling and Mahrez, and I do get that as well. He just looks technically very, very gifted, and he just does have quite a bit of pace in him as well. The fixtures are there for him for the next 2. It's West Ham away and Brentford at home, followed by Arsenal in game week 5, so that's not easy, and Newcastle away in game week 6 as well. So when I'm looking at Savio as an option, I think the main concern for me is minutes, because there's always the threat of Phil Foden coming back in and maybe taking Savio's place. But really, if I'm looking at a short-term horizon for him of the next 2 games, which are their better fixtures, which is West Ham away and Brentford at home, I actually think he starts ahead of Foden. Bear in mind as well that Foden has only had 45 minutes, and that was in game week 1. And Foden also did not have a complete preseason as well. So I think looking at the next 2 games, I do predict that Savio would start. And when you get a Man City attacker at only 6.5 million, that is quite a steal. So I do like the look of him, and he also is quite attacking. He actually put up an XA of 0.37, and he set up 2 really good chances, one for De Bruyne and also the penalty for Haaland as well, which was the first goal that Man City scored against Ipswich. So a very creative player. I just think you need to be wary of the expected minutes when you go with him, as with all other Man City players. But again, if you're going for a wildcard 5 or wildcard 6 kind of a strategy, then I think it's perfectly viable to just take a gamble on West Ham away and Brentford at home and hope he gets some returns there. This is, I guess, the high upside pick that we're going for, but as with all Man City assets, minutes is a risk, so do bear that in mind. So finally, the last replacement is slightly more expensive than Nkunku, especially now that Nkunku has dropped in price. Mbeumo is a full 0.6 million more expensive, so it could be kind of a 2 transfer combination kind of move if you want to go from Nkunku to Mbeumo. But the case for Mbeumo right here is he has Southampton at home in game week 3. Tough fixtures in game week 4 and 5, and from game week 6 onwards, that is when everyone will be hopping onto Brian Mbeumo. So I guess you could go early on him. The only thing I would say about him is I'm not sure right now because the transfer window has not closed. So by the time you're watching this, if you're watching this on Friday, maybe it has closed already because it closes before the game week 3 deadline. So I think what is important for Mbeumo is Ivan Toney leaving, because if Ivan Toney does leave, then Mbeumo will be on penalties, and it just makes him so much better as an asset because he just does have another route to points, and getting penalties is just a huge thing in FPL as we know. So this largely depends on Toney leaving, and say for example that Toney does leave, then I look at the fixtures and I think it's there for him. Again, where game week 4 and game week 5 is quite tricky. I've taken a look at some teams that people have sent me, and I think there is cause for this Nkunku slot, or this kind of 5th midfielder slot, to be benched in game week 4 and 5, and thereafter you play Mbeumo again in game week 6 and 7. One of those possible rotations that I've seen is João Pedro. So João Pedro has Arsenal in game week 3, just as well that Mbeumo now has Southampton at home in game week 3, so you can start Mbeumo instead of João Pedro. And then when you look at the next 2 game weeks, it is a great fixture for Brighton, where João Pedro has Ipswich and then Nottingham Forest. Those are the 2 game weeks you can actually just start João Pedro instead of Mbeumo. And then when the fixtures get bad for Brighton again, you swap Mbeumo back into the starting 11 for West Ham at home and Wolves at home. So I get the appeal, and I also understand why some people are considering it. The only issue here is that he is more expensive than Nkunku, so you can't get to him in one move. But if not, with the rotations present, I think there is good case to go with Mbeumo. The caveat, as always, is that I think you have to wait on Ivan Toney news. At least the good thing is that we will know before the Game Week 3 deadline whether Ivan Toney leaves, and if he does, then I think there is a case to go for Mbeumo. So keep a lookout for that one, and let me know if you guys are considering Mbeumo for your Nkunku replacement. So finally, to wrap up this video, let's talk about some players that I think you should hold and also some players I think you should sell. So for players that you should hold, I have Eze, Fernandes, Watkins, and Isak all here. When I took a look at the statistics for the number of transfers out for all of these players, I was surprised that it was so high. But yet at the same time, I kind of understand it, but I do want to make a case for holding all 4 of these players if you do have them. So talking about Eze and Fernandes first, owners would know that you guys have been massively unlucky for both of them to blank. They have been incredible at dodging points for the first 2 game weeks. Eze got a goal disallowed in game week 1, and thereafter in game week 2 he also hit the post. Fernandes set up a goal, set up an assist in game week 2, clear as day, but Garnacho put it in and it hit Xerxes, so therefore it was disallowed. And then in game week 1 we remember Fernandes getting so many big chances. So I think when you look at the numbers that both of these players have put up, I cannot help but feel like the returns are going to come for them if FPL managers are able to hold on to them still. I get the case on why people would be selling them so much, because now in game week 3 is Chelsea away for Crystal Palace, it's Liverpool at home for Fernandes. Those are not easy fixtures. But when I look at the game week 4 fixtures as well for both these players, it's so good. It's Leicester for Crystal Palace, and then for Manchester United is Southampton. So I think this is actually a case of a test of your mettle. Can you hold on to Eze and Fernandes and still continue to be patient with them? Or do you want to just get rid of them right now? I have a feeling that you are probably in a position where there are bigger fish to fry. For example, some of these players in the sell bracket here right beside me are players that you can address first. So I don't think that Eze and Fernandes are players you need to rush to sell. In fact, I think you should hold them, and even for the game week 4 fixture, I foresee them getting points coming up soon. So those 2 are holds for me. For Watkins and Isak, let's talk about Watkins first. Now is the time from game week 3 onwards where Aston Villa are top of the fixture taker, and their fixtures are just truly a great run. So I think the case for selling Watkins is that he's been missing sitters from game week 1 until game week 2, and even in game week 2 it was just a clear-cut header that he just headed straight into Raya, and Raya had to make a save. I guess it wasn't straight at Raya, but you expect Watkins to put that away on his day. So he also hasn't gotten full 90 minutes as well, so I understand why people would be selling him. But I just do think like now is the time people are going to start transferring Watkins in. Is he going to keep missing those chances that he's getting? I don't think so. Sooner rather than later, he will put those to bed. And soon he will pick up 90 minutes in each game as well once his fitness builds up. I don't think he will consistently get 60 minutes that he's getting right now. I just think Watkins is building up his fitness, and once he's back to form, you know what he's capable of. So now is when people are jumping on Watkins. I see no real reason why we should be selling him at the moment. Now for Isak, I think there is a case slightly more contentious here. There's a case to hold him and also to sell him. To hold him, I think the case for my own self as well, I'm holding him, is because Newcastle actually have not been very convincing attackingly, but Isak in particular has just been quite consistent in these 2 games. Like, look at the chances he's created, the numbers he's put up. Individually as a player, I think he has been doing well despite the Newcastle attack over around him not doing as well. And it's at St. James's Park against Spurs for game week 3. Historically, this is a high-scoring game, and looking at the way that both teams play, their play styles are very focused on attack and not as much on the defense. So I do expect that Spurs and Newcastle will be a high-scoring game, in which case I think Isak, who is also on penalties by the way, would get some returns there. So I think he's fine to hold. The only situation where I think it's fine to consider selling him is if he is your route to Erling Haaland, because now people are transferring in Erling Haaland quite a bit, and I don't think Erling Haaland will rise in price. I don't think it's to that level. But there are moves being made from Isak to Haaland. I do get it because Haaland just scored a hat-trick. So for those of you who went with, for example, a Salah-only draft, one of your routes to Haaland would be selling Isak. So I get it. And in that case, I would be tempted to sell as well. So that would be kind of the only situation where I think it's worth it. If not, I think he is fine to hold as well. And there are bigger fish to fry. So let's take a look at the sell bracket here. Nkunku is right up there, and that's simply the nature of this video, that we need to get rid of Nkunku because his minutes are no longer secure. So I don't think I need to make a case for you to sell Nkunku, but I think for the rest of the players here, it is also time to sell these players. Solanke, 7.5 million. There's so much more that you can do with the money in that forward position. And I think Newcastle away for Game Week 3 is actually the start of a tougher run of fixtures for Solanke. So I think there are other options that you can go for up front to free up some money. Maybe downgrade Solanke all the way to a João Pedro, for example, just to free up money. Even Muniz now in Game Week 3 has a decent fixture, and I prefer him over Solanke as a bit of a dead spot. So I think Solanke is a sell as well. If you have him, I think you can move him on. Same goes for Lewis Hall as well as Garnacho. The case to sell both of them is that they both did not start in Game Week 2. Lewis Hall did start in Game Week 1. But I think when you look at the options in defense that Newcastle has, and Eddie Howe has been playing around with the back four, the Lloyd Kelly has come in for Lewis Hall in Game Week 2. And I think with that being a possibility that Eddie Howe is experimenting, Lewis Hall is no longer a player that we can rely on to get starts. And at 4.5 million, there are so many other better assets to go for. Like Konza, for example, now in Game Week 3, where Aston Villa are top of the fixture ticker, you could very well just get rid of Lewis Hall in a straight swap. So you get a player that is nailed for 90 minutes, and Aston Villa have great fixtures that you can start week in, week out. So I think there's a good case to sell Lewis Hall. As for Garnacho, he has Liverpool at home now in Game Week 3. It's not a great fixture, but the case for him to be sold is that he has not started 2 games now in a row. Yes, in Game Week 1 he picked up an assist, arguably should have scored as well in the maybe 30-20 minutes that he got. And also in Game Week 2, if he wasn't so unlucky that Xerxes kind of touched the ball before it went in, then Garnacho would have had a goal as well. So it could be quite surprising that I put him here. But I think when we look at a 6.5 million asset, we at least want him to start. We don't want a player of that kind of price point to be on the bench and then only getting 30 to 20 minutes at the last part of the game. So he is also a player I think you can start to move on. I get why some people maybe held him after Game Week 1 where he got an assist. You think maybe he starts in Game Week 2 ahead of Ahmad. But I think now that we've seen that, I do think like Garnacho is someone that we can sell, especially now in Game Week 3 when he has Liverpool at home. So there we go with the holds and sells. Let me know what you guys think of these kind of verdicts that I've passed on these players. And in terms of the Nkunku replacements as well that we did in the earlier section, let me know which one of these players that you are going for as the Nkunku replacement. I'm sure that some people would kind of go for different players in terms of you having different squad structures and rotation pairings. So I'll be interested to know where people are going for Nkunku. But if not, thank you for watching this video until the end. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all your support on getting the channel to 8,000 subscribers. It means the world to me. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video tomorrow.